This week, we're going to be learning about the elements and principles of design. The elements of design are seen in all artworks, as well as the principles of design. So it's really important that we understand what they are and how we can use them to make pleasing compositions in our artwork. Today, we're going to be learning about the elements, which are line, shape and form, space, value, color, and texture. So let's begin. Line is the first element of design that we're going to be exploring. And there's 5 different types of line. There is horizontal, vertical, diagonal, zigzag, and curvy. Now I know what you're thinking. Those lines look really boring. And they are. So we have to try to make them a little bit more exciting. So anytime you're incorporating line into your own artwork, you want to think about how can I make this basic line look more interesting? And to do that, you want to vary it one of these 4 ways. So the first thing you can do is you can change the width of a line. Maybe that line is going to get thicker on one end and then goes and gets thinner on the other. That makes that horizontal line look way more interesting. You could also change the length of your lines. Not all of your lines have to be the same height like the zigzag on the left. Here I am like, whoa, changing the crazy height of that. Even like the degree of curve, right? I can change how big and how tall my curve lines are. The third way is you can actually change the degree of your curves or changing the angle you're drawing your lines at. So for a zigzag, I can draw my zigzag lines many different angles. Same thing with my curved lines. The last variation you can do to a line is by adding texture. So I don't know if you guys have any animals, but we're getting a mini golden doodle soon, so we're all very excited here. And they're very, very soft dogs. So, I'm creating a soft little texture like that. You can create little bumpy textures by adding some bumps onto your line. The greatest way to think about how do you create, a texture line is, think about textures that you're familiar with in your life. If something is scratchy looking, how can you turn that into a line? What kind of texture can you add onto that line to show that scratchiness? And only when you think through something like that will you get a more interesting looking line. So there we have it, 5 types of line and 4 ways you can vary them. Now the crazy thing about line is lines actually can evoke an emotional reaction from the viewer. And that's because there's psychological effects that we associate with different lines, whether you realize it or not. So horizontal lines can suggest calmness and usually make people feel relaxed. And the reason horizontal lines do that is because when we go to sleep at night, we lay in a horizontal position. So subconsciously, we associate horizontal lines with that feeling of relax that we have every single day. Vertical lines suggest strength, dignity, and stability. One of my favorite stories from American history is when John F. Kennedy had a debate against Richard Nixon. John F. Kennedy is a really young guy. Nixon's kind of like an older gentleman with weak shoulders and kind of stooped over. People listen to the debate 2 different ways. One, they could watch it on TV or they could listen to it on the radio. Those that watched the debate on TV thought that Kennedy did a better job because he handled himself better physically. He was standing up tall, he looked strong, and so people wanted a strong individual to lead the country, so they were in favor of what Kennedy was saying. People that listened to the radio and were void of having any type of visual cues, determine their viewpoint, thought that Nixon did a better job because he sounded like he knew what he was talking about more. Diagonal lines suggest tension, movement, and action. So if you ever think about something rolling down the hill, it's usually rolling because it's on an angle and on a diagonal axis. So we use that type of movement and momentum in our artwork by placing the elements of design on angles. Curved lines provide relief, softness, gracefulness, and balance. So if you think of like maybe a stream and how the water has to flow around rocks and, other items that might be in the stream, usually if it's not flooded, That water is moving really soft and flowy and smooth. And that water that we be listening to gives us that sense of relaxed kind of presence. And it has a relief to it when we look at it. And then last, zigzag suggests energy and excitement. So, if you get really excited about to go do something, you might get those butterflies or those jitters where you feel like you're shaking inside. And maybe if your body was covered in red paint and you're placed against a piece of paper, you would see these zigzag lines because you'd be jumping up and down with excitement. So let's see how artists use these types of lines in the work to show the psychological effect it has on us. This first painting that we're seeing is done by a woman named Georgia O'Keeffe. She's most known for painting flowers and vast landscapes out west. She married a man by the name of Alfred Stieglitz, who was an art dealer in New York City. So when they first were married, they lived in New York City. She hated it because she was born and raised in the West, and nothing obscured her view of looking at the sky. So being in the city, she hated it because she couldn't see the sky that she's grown up to love. So we have these buildings towering over her. And if you'll notice, these buildings are being placed on a diagonal axis. And because they're being placed on this diagonal axis, we're feeling a lot of tension in the work. She's also utilizing this really dark value here. That's this very gloomy type of painting. Here in this one, we have a horizontal line. You could imagine that these two fishermen are feeling very relaxed. The storm, there is no storm because, there's no crazy winds going on. The sails on the ship look nice and calm. And so by having this strong horizontal axis kind of strengthens that feeling for us. This is Napoleon Bonaparte. He was a French ruler, and he was known for being quite short. So he is trying to overcompensate for his lack of height by placing a lot of things that are vertical in this position. First one, look at his strong stance. He's placed on a completely vertical axis. We have a large grandfather clock that reaches all the way to the top of the painting. Here we have like the tall post in this desk and even this desk. We have a large vertical column back here. Even the strap to his sword is placed on a vertical axis. So he is really trying to show the viewer that he is strong and stable, and he's utilizing those vertical implications to influence the way that we're perceiving him in this work. In this painting, we're seeing two types of lines being used. The first one is zigzag. Zigzag, as you recall, creates a lot of energy and excitement. And as you can see here with these waves, there is so much energy going on. Another line we're seeing is diagonal. These boats are placed on a diagonal axis. And because they're on a diagonal axis, we're seeing lots of movement going on. So there's movement, energy, and excitement, and they're utilizing those lines to help show that type of movement. Last, and certainly not least, we have Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night. So here we have a bunch of curvy lines that are being drawn in the background, and this was done outside of his insane asylum window. And painting for him, artwork for him, was a chance to escape and to capture the world as he saw it. So it's no surprise to me that in a lot of the work, he's utilizing curved lines because he's using painting as a way to kind of calm down from his, insane reality that he lives in. I want to finish off learning about line with this quick video.
Each of these pictures is a self-portrait by a well-known artist. Although they are portraying very similar things, one main idea that differentiates them is how the artists have used line in their work. Line is one of the 7 elements of art, along with shape, color, texture, form, value, and space. These 7 elements are the building blocks of all art and are a great place to start when analyzing or interpreting works of art. Line is the path created when an object moves from one point to another. In the visual arts, lines are made when you draw or paint marks on a paper or canvas, or when materials such as wood, glass, and metal are bent or shaped. Lines are also made by photographers and filmmakers when they choose how to angle their cameras and how to compose their shots. Lines can be horizontal, vertical, or diagonal, straight, curved, or free form. They can be thick or thin, light or dark. Sometimes one line can be all of those things. Lines can be described in many ways: dashed, dotted, rough, smooth, zigzag, implied. What qualities do you see in these lines? How would you describe them? Every artist has a unique way of making lines. It's one way of expressing their individual style. This is a self-portrait by Jean-Michel Basquiat. His lines might be described as bold, jagged, almost messy at times. What do these lines make you think of? Why might he have chosen to represent himself in this way? Compare that to the faint, seemingly unfinished quality of this self-portrait by David Hockney. What do his lines suggest to you? Do they make you think or feel differently than the Basquiat self-portrait? If you were drawing a self-portrait, what kinds of lines would you choose to represent yourself? What kinds of lines would communicate the messages you want viewers to think about? The next time you are looking at a sculpture, painting, or drawing, try to notice what kinds of lines are used and interpret what they mean to you.
The next element of design that we're learning about is value. Value describes the lightness or darkness of a color. Value can give an object a three-dimensional solid quality when we see a full range of value in a drawing. So for instance, we have 3 drawings here where they're all looking three-dimensional, and that's because we have the darkest blacks to the lightest whites with all of the middle grays in between. Here's another series of drawings that I had done for a show a while ago, and I'm using a full range of values to make the apples look more three-dimensional, but I'm also creating a value scale in the background to help evoke a certain meaning that I'll discuss with you later on. Now, the next element of design that we're going to be talking about is color, and I don't have anything up right now for a purpose because I want you guys to think for a second. When you think of breakfast, what colors come to mind? So for me, the first color that I think of is white. I don't know why that turned green for a second. Let me change that. So white, mainly because I either have like a bowl of cereal every day or a smoothie, and I'm always obviously using milk. Another one that I think of, another color, is yellow and orange, like orange juice, or if I'm like wanting to eat eggs. Another one I would say is probably brown too, in case like one day I want to toast. So these are some pretty basic, colors that we see for breakfast. So then look at this one. Here we have a painting that was done by Juan Gris. He is a Cubist style painter, and notice the types of colors we see in here. We have white, yellow, orange, and brown. We do have some blues and blacks, but he is utilizing colors that we're familiar with at that time of day to help better interpret the painting that he's showing us. Cubist style painters would paint a scene from one angle, stop working, and then go from a different angle and paint it again on the same composition. And that's why we're seeing this kind of chopped up illusion to the work. And so because this is slightly abstracted, he needed to utilize colors that we associate with that time of day so we can better understand that, this is a breakfast scene. Now, we have to understand color a little bit more. And to understand color, you have to know its three distinct qualities. Every color has a hue, a value, and an intensity. So, hue means that it's a specific name of a color. Whenever you would take a painting class with me, we're going to talk a lot about different hues because there's like 6 reds you can choose from. There's alizarin crimson, cadmium red light, cadmium red medium. And these different hues show us that there are different values to each of those colors. So remember, value is the lightness or darkness of a color, and we're seeing it again as one of the properties of color. So for instance, alizarin crimson is a really dark red, where cadmium red light is a really light value red. So value helps us differentiate 2 colors from one another. Another thing that helps us understand 2 colors from one another is color intensity. Intensity means the brightness or dullness of a hue. So here the painting on the top right is really bright. It's really intense. To have a color be most intense, you want to use it straight out of the paint tube. Down here, the colors are a lot more dull. Dull does not mean bad. It just means that, a lot of like white or extra colors were added onto this to dilute the saturation of a color itself. So a bright hue means that it's really high intense, high saturation, and a dull hue means that it's low intensity or a low saturation. So let's do a quick review here. Which artwork shows a full range of values? The one on the left or the right? It should be the one on the right. You can see that we have the full range of black to white. The one on the left has a middle range of values, and we're not seeing that full range. So the paint or the photograph on the right looks more 3-dimensional. Which artwork has more intense colors? That would be the painting on the left. The one on the right is very dull. It's all very toned down, where the colors on the left are really bright and pop out. Which artwork shows a limited range of values? And that would be the one on the left. We don't have the darkest blacks. We don't have the lightest whites. Once again, it's that middle gray value range that we're seeing. All right, so quick question. What's black, white, and red all over? A penguin on a rampage. Sorry. If you want a good laugh, go to Greg Stone's website. He has the funniest work. It's really, really funny. Okay. Next, we're going to be talking about texture. Here I have 2 different objects. Based on your previous knowledge of what these objects look like, which one would you want to snuggle? Hopefully, you are sane enough and you're saying the bear. This is not a good choice. That's stupid. You don't want to cuddle with that. You want to cuddle with the bear. Now, we know we want to cuddle with the bear because we have grown up learning about what these textures feel like. Like when you were babies, you put everything in your mouth because that's how you experience texture. And it's from those experiences that we can look at these textures and understand that is soft, that is sharp. Artists use those experiences to their advantage whenever they're showing texture on a 2-dimensional surface or even a 3-dimensional surface. So texture is used to describe the surface quality of an object. It refers to how things feel or look as if they might feel if you were able to touch it. Now we know in artwork, texture isn't always physical. It can be suggested. A lot of drawings and paintings are going to show the illusion of texture. So that's called visual texture. They're having you visualize what that texture might actually feel like. So let's see an example down here of what this could look like. We can visualize that the purple fabric on the left is really soft and silky. And we can visualize the texture on the right to be rough and jagged because it's brick. So artists use texture differently depending on what they want to show. So Ivan Albright on the left, you do not want him to paint a self-portrait of you because he is going to look at any flaw you have and exaggerate it. Here we have a farmer's wife who looks like she's preparing a meal, and she has the most discolored skin I've ever seen. So he is making the texture of her skin look very decayed and old and kind of grungy and dirty. Now, in contrast, Pierre Auguste Renoir, he loved women. I'm sure Albright did as well, but Renoir only wanted to make happy, beautiful paintings. He even was known to have said that he knew the women in his paintings were done when he wanted to smack their bottoms. So what a guy. But you can see that the skin on her is very soft and luscious, which is a huge contrast to the type of texture of skin we're seeing in the Albright painting on the left. The next element of design that we're going to be learning about is shape. Shape is two-dimensional. It's flat. It only has height and width. And with shape, we can have positive and negative shapes in our work. You might also hear the term positive space and negative space. The positive shapes in the picture on the right is the chair. The negative space is the area that surrounds the chair. Here we have paper shapes that are construed together to make a little collage. There are two different types of shapes as well. There's geometric and organic shapes. Geometric shapes typically are described as being man-made and don't often appear in nature. Mainly with geometric shapes, you're going to be able to give them a name, like this is a square and this is a circle, a triangle, rectangle, oval. Organic shapes are associated with things from the natural world and appear to be curving and flowing. These are going to be something where if you would walk outside, you could potentially see that in the woods somewhere. And it doesn't have, you can't name it, it kind of looks like something, but kind of not. Like this kind of looks like a duck, but it kind of doesn't. This kind of looks like teeth, but it kind of doesn't. This looks like one of those pillow things you put around your head whenever you're flying in an airplane or driving in a car, but it kind of doesn't. So because everything's really soft and has, nice rounded edges, it looks to be organic. So let's look here. Which two images are considered to be the organic ones that we're seeing? Well, the bottom two. These top two are considered to be geometric because they look like they are man-made, right? These on the bottom look like you could find something like that in nature. Let's do it again. Which ones are the organic imagery? We have one over here. Let me use a different color so you can see. And then we have one over here. These are so rigid and ragged that, this is a diamond. Here we have a square. I'm sure this type of shape has a name that I can't think of right now, but, they are all very precise. This one, we're seeing all of these random rounded shapes that we can't really give a name to that, so they are organic. Forms are the opposite of shapes. Forms are three-dimensional. They have height, width, and depth. Now you can create the illusion of forms on a two-dimensional surface through the use of perspective and shading and using that full range of values that we previously talked about. So here on this wrench, it looks 3D because we have the darkest blacks and the lightest lights. Klaus Oldenburg and Koos van Bruggen were a team of artists that like to create sculptures of everyday items and enlarge them to this ginormous scale and place them outside. So this is considered a form because it has height, it has width, but it also has depth. This is considered a shape because it only has height and width. It does not look 3D. It looks like a flat cartoon image. So let's review. Is this a shape or a form? This one would be a shape. Shape or form. This one would be considered a form because you're using value to show that it has depth and to make it look 3D. This one's a tricky one, but notice that we're outside and there's a little bit of depth that we're seeing right here. So this one would be considered a form. So let's name a shape and its geometric form. So the first one we could do a square, and then the geometric form could be a cube. You could do a triangle, and the geometric form could be a prism. You could also say a circle, and then this one could be a sphere. Let's review geometric and organic shapes. This would be considered organic. This would also be considered organic. Geometric for this one. Organic. Geometric. The last element of design that we're going to be learning about is space. Space refers to the distance or area between, around, above, below, or within things. For this project and for other projects that you will be creating, we're going to be talking about how you can create space on a two-dimensional surface. So the first way is you can change the color. As things recede into the distance, they become duller and bluer. So if we look here at the mountains in the background, you're going to notice that they are a lot lighter in value than this giant hill in the foreground. There's also a shift in value, color. This mountain is a lot more blue than this one, and that's because there's water in the atmosphere, and so it tends to make things look more blue as things recede into the distance. Detail is also going to diminish as things recede back. So here we have all of these trees in the background, and we can't really see the individual leaves like we can on this tree that's closer to us. We also have overlapping shapes. So here we have baby Jesus overlapping Mary. Fun fact, Mary is always shown with red and blue, and mainly because those are the more expensive colors, and they honor the most important person in a painting by painting them with the most important colors. Placement. As objects recede into the distance, they get higher on the picture plane. So here, this guy is really, really low. He's overlapping that guy. Notice how much taller he is on the picture plane. Even Mary, he's overlapping Mary. Mary's higher up. The hills in the background are higher up. And notice how every hill gets taller and taller and taller and further back up the picture plane. Lastly, you have size. As objects move into the distance, they get smaller. So notice, let me get rid of these marks really fast. This guy is going to be a lot taller than Mary is. It's hard to kind of compare the size, but you can see that there is a size change from the height. It is, converging and getting smaller there. So color, detail, overlapping shapes, placement, and size are the 5 ways you can create space on a two-dimensional surface.